Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Margaret Williamson, Head of Partnerships at Nucleus, a venture studio where we work to educate people, aggregate data, and activate customers inside the psychedelic space. And through that, I wanted to create a show that helped to destigmatize the psychedelic industry by having transparent conversation and getting answered to some big questions by experts who are hands-on in the field every day. And our big question today takes us right to the heart of the matter. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about psychedelics? To help me answer that question, I have one of my friends and a best-selling journalist and author, Miss Amanda Siebert. I would love to welcome her. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Margaret. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing?
I'm so good. I'm so good. I'm so glad that you are here today and that, you know, outside of your capacity as this, best-selling, award-winning speaker, author, journalist, just, life inspiration, that
Oh,
you're here because you're passionate about this subject, right? You're in it every day. You're not only paid to learn about it, but you
mhm.
have an inner passion and a curiosity to learn about these subject matters. And so, hey, let's just get to it. What are some of those big misconceptions? I believe, the big ones that I hear just from kind of the parents out there, those, my parents, when I tell them about the space that I'm working in, it's like, doesn't that put holes in your brain? And, it'll make you go crazy. Uh,
Mhm.
do you still hear those types of things or what's a response that you give?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the more common ideas among sort of the older generation is the idea that taking a substance like magic mushrooms or LSD is going to make you want to jump out of a building, or that you're going to put yourself in some sort of dangerous situation. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that, psychedelics are inherently scary. And I think what this new wave of research and interest in psychedelics is really showing is that that doesn't have to be the truth. You can, mitigate that risk by managing those variables. We talk about set and setting and integration, being with the right people, being in the right place, feeling safe. So the idea that a psychedelic experience has to be inherently scary, I think, is one of the biggest misconceptions out there among those who haven't necessarily been initiated, so to speak.
Definitely, it is one of those things that it's hard to describe, is what I'm finding until you've experienced it yourself. But you hear
Mhm.
more and more about this set and setting. And that really takes to one of the next biggest misconceptions that these are party drugs, that, you
Mhm.
know, psychedelics are meant to be taken when you're getting ready to go out and go to a club and is that true? I mean, or how wrong is that?
Yeah, that's definitely something I cover in my book, as well as the history of these drugs, as some of them as party substances. Some of them are still, commonly used in that setting. I think what is sort of being revealed now is that there are so many different ways these psychedelic drugs can be used. And I won't knock, recreational or for fun use of psychedelics. I think there is a place for that, and increasingly, we're seeing services. I can't remember the name, but I know there are a few of them that, will show up at a festival, and if someone is going through a tough experience, so on and so forth. So I think there is a place for having fun. We are all adults, but I think what we're learning is that they're not just that. They can be used in therapeutic settings to help people through incredibly challenging situations like depression and PTSD and anxiety. And so I think it's really worth considering these other uses for them. People who have perhaps traditionally had doubts, perhaps their doubts have been informed by this sort of party element of psychedelics. And I think it's important to look to the other side as well.
Well, yeah, I would totally put a little ding up for that. That was a nice little mind shift for me. Thank you. You know that sometimes it doesn't mean that we're saying, no, these are not party enhancing, or mood enhancing substances that can be used in
Mhm.
recreational settings. That's just not only what they are, that they can
Exactly.
also be used in these therapeutic and medicinal type
Mhm.
settings. Um, so then that comes to another thing. I think I hear also that it doesn't matter how much of any compound that you take, that you're always going to trip, that you're always going to have this out of body
Mhm.
experience where you're hallucinating. And is that true or is that another misconception?
Definitely, I think a misconception when we look at this trend of microdosing. I'm sure there are some listeners who engage in that practice. And, while there is sort of some debate on whether the microdosing is placebo or not, the fact is, it has been beneficial for some people. And microdosing, for those who are listening and may not know, is taking a psychedelic in a small dose, so low that you don't feel any of the sort of the traditional effects. The walls aren't going to be moving, but you might feel a slight lift in energy and mood. And so it's really been interesting to sort of monitor and write about that trend and speak with different people. Definitely a lot of differing ideas about how it works. We still haven't, I think, gotten there with the research, but yeah, definitely a misconception that every psychedelic you take is going to make you trip.
Right, definitely. Okay, so that's a good one. Another part is that because psychedelics have been around, right? These are not new things. A lot of them are natural. That's another misconception, is that they're not all natural. Is there a distinction
Absolutely.
between some of these compounds and psychedelics?
Totally. So like we see, with plant medicines, and I think it's an interesting thing to note in the sort of health and wellness space, that natural always seems to, people seem to be drawn to that. When we look at drugs like LSD and ketamine and MDMA, these drugs are created in a lab. I mean, yes, LSD comes from from ergot, and we can get into all of that. But the idea is that, not necessarily, things don't need to be natural to have benefit. I think it's up to each individual to decide what kind of medicine resonates with them more. Some people might be more drawn to psilocybin because it comes from a mushroom. Some people might be more drawn to MDMA because they know that it's been made in a lab and it's stable and it's been tested and it's safe. So I think, there really is a spectrum as far as that, and it really is up to the individual as far as what kind of resonates with them most. But I would say the idea that natural is always better is definitely a misconception.
Love it. Thank you for that. And then as you go down that road, there's this other part that feels like, well, we know all there is to know, right? It's either they're coming from these plant-based medicines that have been used for generations, or they were created in the lab and research has been done forever. But
Yeah.
is there more to learn? Is there more to discover? Or is, what we have is where we are?
There's a lot more to discover. And I think even within the knowledge that is already out there, there's a lot to discover. I think one thing that in North America we have a habit of doing is sort of prioritizing and glorifying scientific research. This randomized double-blind clinical trial, very important, not knocking it. I think we definitely need those in order to show that these substances work in the ways that they do. But I think it's also very important to consider the bodies of knowledge that come from the indigenous peoples who have used these medicines since time immemorial. Yes, the medical health related side of these substances is really important, but so is the spiritual aspect. And I think developing a respect for that wisdom is really important, especially right now as we're learning more and more about these substances, to really tune in and listen to not just people who are in white lab coats. That's definitely, I think, an important piece. And yes, there is so much more to discover from all sorts of different experts, not just scientists. So that's something I've tried to consider in the book as well, not just talking to one type of expert, but people from all sorts of different backgrounds.
And this is going to take me a little bit off script, but with that, I had another mind shifting moment conversation, and J.P. Capello from New Life talked about, how different compounds and medicines are tied to different indigenous communities, and how we can really get an understanding of where they come from, what their true purpose was. And with that, through your research and your work, have you found that we should all be open to try all of these different types of compounds and medicinal modalities, or should some remain private to particular indigenous tribes and communities?
That's definitely something that I cover in my book, especially in the chapter on mescaline and peyote. And I spoke with Sandor Ironrope, who has worked with the Native American Church. He's a representative in South Dakota. And having a conversation about him with this was really interesting. He explained to me how this has been a ritual and a healing practice for generations, and how how intrinsic it is to their culture and their community. And this medicine is, on the verge of, like, it's very hard to find, and so the conservation efforts that are out there are particularly important to his community. And so I think that given the history, the long-standing history, and also the history of what America has done to Indigenous nations, it's really, I think, worth considering that this community and these communities should have, I think, first, the first say or first opportunity to use them before other people do, just because we've taken so much from them.
Yes.
That's my stance. I know not everyone would agree with me on that, but lots of history.
I think it's a valid thing to consider, because we do give, like, we mentioned the people in the white coats and in the laboratories, we give them first rights and dibs and patents and trademarks.
Yeah, patents.
Yeah, to protect their investment and their research. And really, it is these Indigenous tribes and communities that have done so much of the research and so much of perfecting of formulations that, it makes a valid argument to feel like they should have some sort of protection over that intellectual property as well. So, I love that. So good. That was another mind shift for me. Coming back to my list that I wanted to make sure that we cover. And it sort of is a lead in there, as we talk about the more spiritual side of things, and that is a component. And I think sometimes there's a misconception that potentially you can separate those two, that there can be some healing done without sort of that deep work. And what's been your experience with that? Is that a misconception, or that's true that, you can get the benefits without the...
I think using psychedelics can be one tool or should be one tool in someone's toolbox. I think, many people go down the road of like, oh, wow, this medicine is changing my life. I'm going to keep using it, and I'm going to use it next weekend, and then I'm going to use it next weekend again. And like, I think there's something to be said for sitting with the things that you learn in an experience, and thinking about how you can consider other areas in your life to sort of learn from the insights that you receive while you're sort of in a psychedelic experience. So yeah, I think for me, integration has been really important. We hear this word all the time. What does that mean? What is integration? And it's sort of what I just explained, just this idea of sitting with the things you learn, integrating them into your real life, your regular life, I guess, your not altered state of mind. And community is a really important part of that too. Having people in your life that you can talk to. I've spoken with a lot of people who perhaps, have tried a psychedelic and they've had this wild, wonderful experience, and then they, go into their community and no one in their family or their group of friends has done the psychedelic. And so they're like, where do I talk about this? So that's a really key, the community piece. And then also, I should have mentioned this first, the preparation. If you're thinking about doing a psychedelic, sit with that intention a little bit, why and where, and kind of pick that apart a little bit before kind of jumping in. Is kind of the advice I would give there.
And maybe that's, a misconception also, is that, you're one of these things that your first time doesn't matter. And in a way, you can make it matter, right? We can be intentional about those things. So instead of maybe accepting that friend's offer on a weekend getaway randomly, and saying, well, if that tempted me, then let me sit with that for a minute. Let me examine why that felt, exciting or curious to me, and then figure out what's really right for you, and what is that setting, like what intentions do you have, and then where should you be, that actual physical setting and environment where you are when you decide to take the medicine. So interesting. I like it. The last one that I want to make sure that we cover is more for those people that are in the industry, right? Those that have understood and can see the benefits and the the large scale change and benefits that could happen through a restructuring of the healthcare industry, attention on mental health as a viable, and we have ways to treat some of these symptoms, but that it can be the magic bullet, that it can be our cure all, that it can be that one thing that we've all been missing.
Precisely.
Yeah, I mean, is that a misconception, or is that something that's like, yeah, like this is it, guys, let's go?
I think that's definitely a misconception. Yeah, psychedelics are wonderful, lots of potential, have had a profound impact on my own life, have helped me, come out of PTSD and depression, and I'm eternally grateful to them and to all the people that have helped me through these experiences. But it's really all the other pieces in my life that have helped me move forward. I kind of, like I said in the last question, taking those things I've learned and then really applying them. So changing routines in my day-to-day life, eating a healthy diet, moving my body regularly, learning how to communicate better with people, building healthy relationships. All these things really support living a vibrant and authentic life. And these are things that I have learned to integrate into my life thanks to these experiences that I've had that shown me that I actually deserve to live this kind of life, which is, I think, the beautiful thing about psychedelics is they have the potential to bring us out of this really dark place and show us that actually we can feel really good. Oh wow, I just got chills. Thank you for asking me this question, because I think it really is important for people to know that one weekend trip with psilocybin or MDMA is not going to fix everything. It's really a process. It can be like a starting point.
And and that's on so many levels so important, because not only you're supporting that saying, hey, this should be able to be a part of people's toolkits. Exactly. Because it is so transformational, but we have to remember that it's part of a toolkit, and that if you've gone through, you took the leap and you went through some retreat and you had an experience, and you're not feeling like, this was supposed to just turn me around. Don't look at yourself as a failure. Don't go back down that rabbit hole. Just say like, okay, the psychedelics, potentially they did what they were supposed to do. Now you go do what you're supposed to do with this new knowledge, right? Like said, start moving your body, start changing some daily routines. And that's really the hard part. And when we talk about it not being the magic bullet, it's usually because we want to escape the hard part, right? The actual work that we have to do. And unlike, with everything, this too is not a magic bullet. It can give you a big boost, but you got to start running when you hit the ground. Otherwise you'll fall back down. So I think that's a really important message. Well, anything else, anything big, obviously we've talked about you're in a roundabout way, but, I'll go ahead and say it for all those viewers. Amanda is an author of several long stories and books, but her latest one is all about psychedelics, called Psyched. And it goes through 7 different, compounds that are really reshaping the landscape and digging in. It sounds like, you dig through some of those past misconceptions, the histories, and even the future and where we could be going with these compounds moving forward. So if someone wants to learn more about your book or just hear more of your opinion, how can they connect with you?
Well, they can connect with me on social media. So on Instagram and Twitter, I have the same handle. It's at Amanda_Siebert. They can check out either of my books. So this is Psyched, 7 Cutting Edge Psychedelics Changing the World. It just came out. You can get it on Amazon and all sorts of booksellers. Your indie local bookstore should have it too. And then this book I wrote a couple years ago about cannabis. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's been really lovely to unpack some of these misconceptions with you, Margaret.
Yes, likewise. I look forward to our continued conversations, and we will have you back soon. Thank you so much. And if you're watching and you have an idea of a mind-shifting moment, share it with us, or you have a big question that you want to get answered, please connect with me. I'll see you guys next week.